Cameron Joseph is Washington bureau chief for the New York Daily News. Good enough to join me now from Washington. And Cameron, first, I would like to weigh in on the argument we just heard the president lay out in that piece of sound we just heard.
Well, he was basically going after this three-judge panel that has yet to make a decision on whether or not his refugee ban, his travel ban, is constitutional and whether it should be allowed to go back into practice while the bigger issues around the case work their way through the courts. And that's really unusual. I mean, we've seen presidents criticize court decisions in the past, most recently, President Obama during his State of the Union saying that Citizens United was a wrong decision. But we've never seen a president or president-elect go after sitting judges while these cases are in front of them and go after them in such a personal way. And this is the latest escalation. He was tweeting about the so-called judge who ruled that the ban should be temporarily suspended over the weekend. And here he is going after these folks who haven't even made a decision on the case yet. So this is really unusual. And a lot of critics are saying that this is basically him showing disdain for the separation of powers and the importance of the judiciary in a democratic system.
And a very curious decision, considering that we did hear, even in the arguments yesterday, the campaign rhetoric in part was something that was on the table there as it regarded intent. The president, though, also interestingly said that he wanted to delay the rollout of the executive order. He said he wanted to do it for a month, and then he said he wanted to do it for a week, but was warned not to by law enforcement. This runs counter to things we heard from him during the campaign and certainly here in these last few days. Do you have any idea what he was talking about?
It's news to me, and I think it's news to a lot of people, the folks I've talked to in the White House and DHS who are responsible for actually putting this in place. No one has said anything about this to this point, and clearly the rollout was rather chaotic, was rather bumpy, did not go as the White House has planned or hoped. DHS Secretary Kelly essentially admitted that in testimony to Congress yesterday, that they should have possibly waited a little longer, let Congress know what was coming and talk things through with them, giving them a heads up. And so it's unclear to me whether this is factual or whether this is the president trying to pass the buck after a rocky rollout. This is an argument, we heard that this is why they moved so fast, is because they didn't want to give folks the heads up to be able to sprint back into the U.S. before this wall essentially came up. But honestly, I haven't seen any facts to back up what he just claimed, and I haven't heard anything from the White House previous to this that would indicate that this is accurate. I'm not saying it's inaccurate. This is just the first I've heard of it. It's the first time I've heard the president make this argument.
And in passing the buck, we should note that Secretary Kelly he took the buck, sharpened it, and then seemed to fall on it yesterday during testimony of his own. He certainly, the president did today, seem someone who, if nothing else, just does not want to lose here. What's the political fallout if he does?
I think it's pretty big either way, honestly, because I think this is probably going to the Supreme Court, and we'll see what the Supreme Court ends up doing. But clearly we've got a 4-4 split right now with an open justice. And I think that if he's trying to get Judge Gorsuch confirmed quickly, it's unclear whether they'll be able to do that before or after this actually arrives at the Supreme Court. This really focused the argument on that. And this is his biggest campaign promise. And so if this is enacted, I think that this fires up a lot of people on the left. Clearly, it already has. You saw the protests at the airport almost instantaneously after this went into place. And I think that if it gets struck down, I think it's problematic for actual policy for him. The issue, though, at that point politically is he can say, well, I tried to do this, the courts wouldn't let me, it's their fault. And then the next time there is a terror attack in the U.S., and as we've seen, it's really a question of when, not if. We keep seeing relatively small but serious terror attacks through the U.S. He can blame this on the judges, and basically he already has. He said, if there are any terror attacks, he didn't specify terror attacks from people coming in from these countries, it's going to be the judge's fault, is essentially what he said over the weekend on Twitter. And so politically that could play well for him. At the same time, clearly it would be a major campaign goal and a major promise that he made from the start that wasn't upheld by the courts if it gets struck down.
Well, if that was one cornerstone of the campaign, another certainly was the building of the wall. He also used some of these remarks earlier today to discuss its progress. I want to take a look and listen, get you to weigh in on the other side.
The wall is getting designed right now. A lot of people say, oh, Trump was only kidding with the wall. I wasn't kidding. I don't kid. I don't kid. I watch this and they say I was kidding. No, I don't kid. I don't kid about things like that, I can tell you. No, we will have a wall. It will be a great wall, and it will do will be a big help. Just ask Israel about walls. Do walls work? Just ask Israel. They work.
Well, again, that extemporaneous comment leaves us a lot to unpack here, Cameron. But as it regards the wall to be built along the U.S.-Mexico border, we heard Secretary Kelly say that he hopes to see construction underway in the next 2 years. How do you see Congress handling it all?
Well, Congress has indicated that it's going to support funds to build more things along the border. Secretary Kelly yesterday was saying that this isn't actually going to be a wall. There's going to be physical barriers in some spots. There will be portions of wall built in some spots, but the idea of a wall along the entirety of the U.S.-Mexico border is physically unfeasible, cost prohibitive, and actually wouldn't work. Kelly said yesterday that he went and met with border agents, and they're basically saying we don't want anything we can't see through because they want to be able to see what's happening on the other side. So some of this is going to be surveillance. Some of this is through rivers and valleys. And Will Hurd, who's a Texas Republican congressman who represents much of the border, is basically showing photos of physically how this would be impossible and kind of lambasting the idea of it. So, whether you want to talk about a physical, literal wall and take the president literally with what he's saying, or whether you want to say a metaphorical wall, which basically means building more security along the wall, I think you're going to see a lot more security. You're going to see a lot more border security efforts. But the idea that this is actually going to be the wall that he promised is essentially his own folks are admitting ain't going to happen.
Cameron Joseph of the New York Daily News, as always, we appreciate the time and insight, Cameron.
Thanks for having me.